Hey guys, good day. In this video, we are going to continue our small project, which is the inventory management system. So currently, we have the only one um, entities or tables in our database, so which is the users table, and this captures or stores data regarding our users. So we have the ID, which is the primary key, and then we have the first name, last name, email, and then the password. So if we look at the app, our current progress, so we have the dashboard page, which is currently empty, and also we have the users page, so we can add the user. And then also here we have the edit action, delete action for our users, and then here we have the list of users displayed in table. So this video we are going to create additional tables, so basically a simple and a complete inventory management system database, just the basic data. So we'll create a database that captures all the data related to inventory. So before we start, let's just discuss first about ERD, what it is, since we are going to create the ERD of our system before we create it in our server or our phpMyAdmin. So let's start. So the ERD, or the entity relationship diagram, so this is a type of structural diagram for use in database design. So before you actually create the database or import tables, create the tables, the columns inside the server, so this is our local server, we need to design it first, and that design is called the entity relationship diagram. So if we search in Google, we'll have lots of images, as you can see here. This is an example of an ERD. Here I think this is for school management, so they have this one here, different data. So we have the professor data, student data, so class, the enroll, the room, the course data, and inside are the properties. So properties are basically what data are we going to capture for each entity. So for example, the student, we have the student ID, we have the first name, last name, the location, the professor, we have the name, and then the ID. And then also the entity relationship diagram. So here it says it contains different symbols and connectors that visualize two important information. So here the major entities within the system scope, and then the interrelationships among these entities. So the major entities, so in this example, these are the students, the class, the enroll, the room, and then the course, the professor. So these are the um, the data, or what they call the entities. And then inside the entities, as I've said before, are what data or properties that we are going to capture for that entities. And then here second is interrelationship among these entities. So in ERD we can also define the relationship between the entities. So as you can see here in this example, so the student, it can enroll to many classes, or the professor can have many class. So there are different types of relationships. So as you can see here, example, the professor and the class. So a professor can have many class, which means it's a one to many relationship. Here the student can enroll in multiple classes, or also the class can have many students, so it's a many to many relationship. And here we have, it's not written here, but there's a one-to-one relationship, which I am going to discuss when we create our ERD diagram for the inventory management project. So if you want to create ERD, so there's a lot of app that you can use to create an ERD for your system. And in this example, I'm going to use the Lucid app or the Lucid chart to create the um, the ERD of our system. So okay, let's start creating. So here, to design the entity, we saw entity is also called a table. So let's just drag this one. So the first entity that we have is the users. Let's just zoom this one so we can see it properly, then hide that one. So here we have the users entity, and now we have to capture the different data that we want to capture in our system. So we have the ID, of course, which is the primary key. Then here the first name, so this will be a string. So this here, this is the column name or the data properties, and then here this is the data type. So we have string, integer, or maybe a date. And here last name, also a string. Then let's just insert a row. Then here we have the email, so this is just for signing in the user, so let's do a string. And then here created that, and then updated that. Then here we can have the date time, so we capture the date and the time it was created, or also the date and time it has updated. So now we have the users table or entity. So we need also to store data for our products. So I'll just duplicate this one, then update some fields. So call this one products table or entity. So the same thing, we have the ID and then the primary key, I mean the ID and it's the primary key. Then here just update the first name to be the product name. So it's a string. Then here we can have created by, so we need to capture who created this product in our system, and this one here, it's a foreign key since the created by value, its value will be coming from the users table. So it's a foreign key, and this value here, this is a key from the users, which is the ID. Also we have the created at, the updated at, then also we can delete this property. So there's still a lot properties that we need to add, but for now this is just a simple project, so we don't need to add those properties. So now let's create the users and the products relationship. So in our system, the users can add products, and that product can be one or two or many. So here in our diagram, we can connect the ID from the users and then connect it inside the created by. And as you can see here, this is a one notation. Here it's many, so this means the user can create multiple products in our system. And in our system, we know who created the product, since in our products entity we have the created by, which stores the ID of the users, and then that will let us query that ID and display or pull and display that users in our system. So the next one that we create is the stock of the product. So here we can duplicate this one and then stocks. So the same thing, it has the ID, the product. So instead of product name, we'll have the product ID, which is a foreign key from the products table. So this one, the product and stock, so since a product can have one stock record, it will be a 1-to-1 relationship. So here we can update this symbol. So instead of that one, we'll have 1-to-1 relationship. So now let's just add insert text thing again. Text insert. So here this is one to many. Users can create multiple products. Then here let's just duplicate, and then here 1-to-1 products has one stock record. And then of course we need to have a supplier of this product. So the same thing, let's just duplicate, then here we'll name it supplier, and then here the same thing, we have the ID, we have the supplier name, and then let's make it a string. Then here the location of the supplier, so it's also a string, maybe an email, so we can capture the contact details of the supplier. And then we have the created at, updated at, and also we'll need to add the one created the supplier in the system, and this is a foreign key. So the users and products, they have the same relationship with the users and suppliers, so it's a one to many relationship. So one user can create multiple suppliers in our system. And then here, of course, so every time we ordered a product from our supplier, we need to capture that data. So let's duplicate this one again, and we'll name it product supplier. So now in this table, we'll capture the supplier, the product, or what the supplier supplies. I mean what product the supplier supplies. And then here, this is an FK, means a foreign key. So the product will have multiple records in the product supplier. So here the product ID is linked to the product column. Let's just move this one, and then just insert. Okay. So here, let's properly link this one. Then the supplier can have multiple records in this product supplier, since they can supply multiple times. And then here we can have we can delete this one, and here we can have the email, which no, not the email, we'll delete the email. And then the created by, so we need to capture who initiated the order from the supplier. So the same thing, the users can trigger or create a multiple order of supplies from the supplier. So now we need to add a status of these products. So what's the status of the order? Insert row below, can have status. Then here can have a string, so maybe an active or pending or cancelled status. And then also in our stacks, we need to add, of course, the quantity. Insert row below, quantity. And then here we have the integer, since we store a number inside this property. And then here we can insert row quantity ordered. Also it's an integer. And then here quantity received, which is also an integer. So we need to capture how many did we order and also how many we received from the order. And maybe we add e deficit. How do you name that one? Quantity remaining something. Let's just name it what remaining. So just in case the order, the quantity we receive is less from the one we ordered, so we'll capture that one. This is also an integer, so this is basically our ERD diagram of our inventory system. So now let's insert a headers, inventory management system, ERD or entity relationship diagram, and so on. This is header. So as you can see here, we have different data or entities. We have the stocks, the products, the users, supplier, and then the product supplier. So we also capture the different columns for each entities, and then also their relationship. So user can input multiple products in our system. Also in our system we have a record of the stocks of this product, and then here the users can order the product from our supplier, and every transaction is recorded inside this table. So next thing is, since we already have the ERD, we are going to import or create this one in our server. So I'm going to discuss to you how to import this one using code, the MySQL code, and also inputting it or importing it manually in the phpMyAdmin. So now let us proceed with uploading or importing or creating our ERD diagram inside our phpMyAdmin. So currently we already have the users table, so we don't need to create users table. So let's just update the color thing, the background, to green. That means you already finished importing or creating it inside the phpMyAdmin. Now let's create the products. So there are only 4 entities left, so 2 of these I'm going to create manually inside the SQL or the phpMyAdmin, and the other 2 entities I'm going to create it inside using a MySQL query. So we'll have an idea or the basic idea of running SQL commands inside the phpMyAdmin. So here let's create the products and the supplier. Let's go click the inventory on the main database. Then here we need to add a new table. So as you can see here, we have this create table, and we name this one as product. So the product name is, the table name is this one, so product supplier stocks. So let's go to create products and then the number of columns. So the columns is this one, 1 2 3 4 5. And then let's create that one. Then here first is the ID, which is the primary key. This is an integer and default value is 11, so it will use 11 as default value even if we don't set the length or the values for this column. And then we want it to be auto incremented, so this is auto increment column. So let's just check this one, and automatically it will select the primary index of our column. So the next is the product name, and this is a string, so the varying characters. So here we can set to 191. I think that's enough for storing product names. And next is created by, and created by, so this is an integer. So actually, as you can see in our diagram, this should be connected with the user's ID. So this is an integer. Then later on we're going to update or add a foreign key constraint to this column. Next is, or maybe here, yep, we're going to create a one after we create this table. We have the created at, and then the dated at. So the created at, this is a date and time, so just select that one. And then also we can yeah, I think this is good to go. So let's save. So after we create the columns, so we have this connection between the users and the products by a created by. We can then click the relation view. Then here we can leave it like this, and then created by database. Which database? It's inside the inventory and should be the users, and the column which is the ID. So you can create the constraint name, so maybe fk user, and then if we save this one, as you can see here, our indexes fk user, it is linked to the created by column. So if we browse structure, as you can see we have the primary, and then here an index which is connected to the user ID. So here next is supplier. So the same process, we go to click the inventory, Then here we'll need to add the name of the table, supplier, and then here create 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 columns or rows. So we have the ID, then we set it to auto increment. Then we have the supplier name, supplier location, and this is a varying character. Just set it to 191 191. Then here we have the email, which is a varchar. Let's just do 100 characters on the left. Then created at, updated at. So created by, the same thing, we'll need to make this as integer and then update the relationship, since here, as you can see, it is connected to the user ID. So here created by, and this should be a date time. So now let's save, updated at, and then save. As you can see here, we have the products, properties, and then here let's create the relationship. So if key user, then here created by is inside the inventory database, table is products, I mean the user, and in the ID, so let's save. So we have an error. So created by, it's an integer. Let's do that again. If k created by inventory users, then ID. So it has been updated, so we have now a key or the foreign key relationship set inside the supplier table. So now inside so for these two entities, I'm going to create it using the MySQL query. So here is an example of how we can create our simple query. So we have this format, so create table and then the name of the table, then here we have the column, and then the data type, so varying character, integer, date time. Then here we have the constraints, so if it's a primary key then we need to use this one. Then the name of the column, which is the key, same thing with foreign key. And then of course for foreign key you need to specify which table the ID belongs to. So let's create our that one. So in inventory, same thing, we click the database in phpMyAdmin, click the database, and then inside this tab SQL, create that one. We can now then, so here we can create table, then we have the stocks, Then here we need to specify the columns, so we have ID and then integer. So here we have list of data types in MySQL. So for integer, can use this one. Next is we have the created by quantity, created by quantity, created at updated at. So the quantity is also an integer, created by is also an integer, which is or which has a relationship with the products. So created at is a date time, so here can just copy this one, paste, and then we need to add the constraints, so primary key and the foreign key. So in our stacks table, the ID is the primary key, so here's the format, primary key, so the name of the column, which in our case the ID, and then here the foreign key, so the name of our column, which is the created by, and then the user or the reference table, users, and then ID. So now let's create. So if we go here, as you can see, we have the stacks table. If we browse the structure, you can see we have the primary and then the foreign key, which is linked to the users table. Sorry, so this should be inside the products table instead of the users. Oh no. So actually this is correct. Inventory users created by. However, we need to add a new column for products. So let's just create that one using manually. So after ID, so product ID integer, then save, then here we'll add a new relationship. So this one here, this is for created by, create a new constraint. Okay, should be stacks, or we can just leave it empty, it will create its own name. Product ID inside the products table. So if we save that one, as you can see, we have now two relationship created. So we have the product ID, and also we'll need to update our database or the ERD diagram. So this should be one too many. So we had to add the created by, so we know which or who updated the stacks. So for now we can manually, so it would be better for the system to automatically update the stack once the product has arrived. However, in our case, we'll just set this one, the created by, so we know, just in case, or maybe we at first we need to, um, manually input the um, the stock of the product. So we need to capture who inputted or updated. So now let's create the last table, which is the product supplier. So same thing, click the inventory SQL, and then here we can create the command product supplier. So ID, it's an integer. We have supplier ID, it's also an integer. Product ID, an integer. Or just do the product and then the supplier. So quantity ordered, an integer. Quantity received, integer. Quantity remaining, an integer. So status, this is the bar chart, maybe 20 length, or in 20 characters. Created by, we have, it's also an integer. Created, that is a date, time, dated is a date, time. So now let us add the primary key. So here we have in our table the primary key, which is the ID column. Now the foreign key, we have the supplier. So just you recap this supplier here. It's the column name. So as you can see, supplier. And then here we have the reference table. Supplier. Then here the ID, or the table, the column from the reference table that connects to our foreign key. So let's just copy this one for product, and then here the table, and the ID, then next is the created by. Here we have the created by, the supplier, the product. So created by, reference to the users, and then here reference to ID. So let's run, and as you can see, we have the product supplier table structure here. So we have 3 columns that are foreign key or depends or uses the values from different tables: the supplier, the product, and the created by. And here as you can see the relationship. And then here let's just update the supplier. Should be suppliers. So the way to update it is update, run a query, update table, suppliers, supplier, set table name equals suppliers, update so actually it's alter table supplier, rename suppliers. So as you can see here, it is now suppliers instead of supplier. So here we can now set it to done. So that's basically it. We have created the ERD of our inventory system, and then also here we successfully migrated them in our phpMyAdmin manually or via MySQL commands. So in the next video we are going to add more functionalities in our system. So this will be adding products, managing products, the supplier list, also the stacks. So that's it guys, thank you for watching and see you on the next video.